Now, as I mentioned before, there were a number of Indian raids being conducted in Texas and northern Mexico by both the Eastern Comanche and the Eastern Apache. Okay, these are two separate groups. They weren't allied together. They conducted raids on their own, separately. Okay, and in these raids, they were taking a number of heads of cattle, sheep, horses was another big thing. The Comanche were able to gain a lot of horses from these raids. They had huge herds of horses, which they used as currency, right? They basically would trade with other tribes as well as European powers for these horses that they were taking from the Spanish. Okay, it was part of their economy, basically, right? These raids. So this was a consistent thing happening a lot. So during that early period in Texas in the 1700s, where you have the missions controlling the ranch industry and you have Mexican settlers as well in Texas, they were getting raided regularly by the Comanche and also by the Apache. Okay, and so this was a major issue for Spain because they're losing a lot of wealth. Right, horses cost a lot of money. These, cattle, sheep, they cost a lot of money, and so when they're lost during these raids, that means that ultimately it's hurting the economy of the Spanish Empire. Okay, so that's an issue. So eventually, the Spanish governor of Texas, Domingo Cabello y Robles, is going to sign a treaty with the Eastern Comanche, right? And this is going to lead to a 30-year truce with the Comanches. All right. We talked about something similar before where you had a Spanish governor signing a treaty with the Western Comanche in New Mexico, right? And we talked about Cuerno Verde, the Western Comanche leader who was killed by the Spanish, and ultimately the Spanish decided to kind of bribe the Western Comanche with a number of gifts, including horses, guns, ammunition, clothing, and stuff, so that the Western Comanche would stop raiding New Mexico. Well, in Texas, you have something very similar, right, where there's a treaty signed with the Eastern Comanche, right, the eastern group of the Comanches, with the Spanish, and so ultimately the Comanches will become an ally with the Spanish for a period of time. Okay, so this is going to stop the Comanche raids, and the Comanche are actually going to ally with the Spanish against the Eastern Apache in Texas. Okay, and this is what the Spanish want. This was actually a plan from the Spanish. They figured, okay, look, if we are able to get the Comanche and other Native American groups in Texas to join with us, we could focus on stopping the Eastern Apache, who also were raiding, the Spanish in Texas, major issue. We could stop the Eastern Apache and force them to stop their raids as well, and ultimately that would solve the problem of Indian raids in Texas, right, which was hurting the Spanish economy. And so this plan is actually going to play out. The Spanish and the Comanche will ally together against the Eastern Apache, and they will force the Apache to sign a treaty with them. Okay, so the Apache will sign a treaty with the Spanish, but that actually doesn't stop the Apache raids. Okay, you're still going to have Apache raids taking place, not in the same area as they were before. They're going to move into the southwestern portion of Texas and into northern Mexico. Because of warfare led by the Spanish and the Comanche allied together against the Apache, yes, the Apache will stop their raids in parts of Texas, but they will just move to another area of Texas in the southwestern portion and into northern Mexico and still continue their raids there. Okay, and so the Spanish aren't able to completely solve this problem of Indian raids in terms of the Apache, but for 30 years, the Spanish are able to maintain a truce with the Comanche. Okay, so you have some success there, but not a complete success. You still have the issue of Indian raids going on in Texas. Now, in Texas, you never really see a very large Mexican settler population. It's always a very small population. And remember, Spain is trying to populate Texas so that they could solidify their claim to that land. Right? They want that to be their colony. They don't want another European power or the U.S. To go into that territory and start settling that land because there's not enough Mexican settlers there. Okay, that's one of the issues. And so Spain is actually going to reach out to Anglo-Americans so that they would come and immigrate to Texas, become Mexican citizens, and contribute to the population there. So there would be a larger population, a larger presence under the control of Spain there in Texas. Okay, and so this was a part of the plan, and so you're going to have Spanish officials reaching out to Anglo-Americans, and there's a number of requirements that Anglo-Americans will have to follow if they are going to immigrate into Spanish Texas. For one, they're supposed to be of good moral character, right? And so the Spanish government is trying to get families, they're trying to attract families to come move into Texas, Anglo-American families, and to settle there. Okay, but in reality, a lot of individuals who come to settle Texas are actually fugitives running either from debt or from the law, maybe criminals coming from the United States and immigrating to Texas to run away from their problems in a sense, right? So if they say they're in major debt and they're trying to run away from their creditors, you will have a number of individuals moving into Texas for those reasons. Or maybe they're criminals running away from the law. That also happened. And so you have a number of people, Anglo-Americans, coming from the U.S. who are not of the best moral character in terms of the fact that they're criminals. And so this is the type of people that you have coming into Texas. It wasn't the plan of the Spanish government to attract these kind of people, but that's mainly what happened. Another requirement for immigration into Texas was that Anglo-Americans needed to become Catholics. Right? They had to convert to Roman Catholicism. And, you know, a lot of Americans, most Americans weren't Catholic at this time. They were Protestants. Okay, and so they had to, in a sense, change their religion, even though, you know, both are Christian, but there are some slight differences in belief there. Okay, so you had to become Catholic, you had to be of good moral character. Of course, you had to follow Spanish and later on Mexican law. Okay, that's important. And when you conduct business, it has to be done in Spanish. Okay, so all official business has to be conducted in the Spanish language in Texas. Okay, so you'll have Anglo-Americans needing to learn a degree of Spanish. There are some settlement restrictions as well. So Anglo-American immigrants cannot settle within 60 miles of the border of Texas with the United States. Mexican officials didn't want Anglo-Americans to maintain close ties with the United States, right? The goal is to make them loyal Mexican citizens, right? And so you kind of want to separate them from their ties with the U.S. and assimilate them into Mexican culture. Right? And if they live close to the United States, they're less likely to be assimilated into Mexican culture, right? They're going to be visiting their family, they're going to be crossing the border all the time, and so you want these Anglo-American immigrants to really become Mexican citizens, and so that's why you're having them, you know, change their religion, start to speak Spanish language, at least on the official level, you know, follow Mexican law. You're trying to assimilate them into Mexican society. Okay, and so that's why you have this settlement restriction where Anglo-American immigrants cannot settle within 60 miles of the border. Okay, another way to try to get Anglo-American immigrants to assimilate into Mexican society was to have them intermarry with Mexican citizens, right? So if an Anglo-American immigrant, a man, were to marry a Mexican citizen, you know, a Mexican woman, he could actually get some incentives for this. He would actually be eligible to buy more land than he would if he wasn't married to a Mexican citizen, because there were limits on how much land an Anglo-American immigrant can own in Texas. But if you get married to a Mexican citizen, you could buy more land, right? So it kind of opens things up for you, and this is an incentive for Anglo-Americans to become more assimilated into Mexican society by intermarrying with Mexican citizens.